25,840 contraband cell phone recoveries. Brendan Carr, what's the effect of that?
Yeah, President Trump is making America safe again, and he's delivering results in ways that we didn't see in the last 4 years. This is one example. As you noted, tens of thousands of contraband cell phones have been pouring into prisons all across the country. They're being used to orchestrate kidnappings, to order hits, to run drug operations and criminal enterprises. The senator and I had a chance to visit a Supermax prison in Arkansas, and they said that contraband cell phones are the root of so much that has gone wrong. And increasingly during the Biden years, state and local law enforcement went to the administration and asked for help, and they didn't get it. Now with President Trump, that's changing, and we're going to allow state and local law enforcement to take action.
Saw that piece on Fox this morning, and I never even heard. My daughter Ashley is the one who reached out to your people. I've never heard about a contraband phone. Please tell me what that really is. And first of all, why do these prisoners even have cell phones?
Yeah, this is really a wild story that most people don't think about, but it affects your own local community. So we are seeing tens of thousands of cell phones illegally in the prison system being pulled out every year. And again, those are just the ones that are found. So you probably have to multiply that by 3 or 4 for the ones that aren't found every single year. Now, how do they get there? It's a variety of ways. You have drones that are used to drop them over prison fences. You have people that'll, shoot them over prison fences. You'll have, people that are working in, equipment portions of these facilities that will get them smuggled in somehow. And here's the reality is people are using these to continue to commit crimes. They are using them to run drug operations from inside the cells. They're ordering hits. There's a story in Georgia. 2 13-year-old kids were shot pursuant to a hit that had been ordered on them from a contraband cell phone. In fact, I first learned of this, back in 2015. I met a police officer from Sumter, South Carolina, Captain Robert Johnson. He was a veteran. He worked in Lee Correctional Facility in Bishopville, South Carolina. His job was to seize contraband cell phones. And it turns out that's the most dangerous job you can have in prison because a contraband cell phone is everything to a prisoner. It's how they get money. It's how they can, engage in this illegal activity. Well, he was too good at his job, and one morning he was getting dressed for work, 5:30 in the morning. His door was kicked in. He was shot 6 times in the chest. He's miraculously survived, and it was, again, a hit ordered from a contraband cell phone. I actually had the chance to call him on the phone just last week after this announcement. He was just so grateful that we're finally taking action, because during the Biden years, local law enforcement came to the administration and said, please help us. Let us jam these cell phones. So if they do get in, they're nothing more than expensive paperweights, and they didn't get any relief. And so now we're going to vote this month on a plan that would empower these local jails and prisons to finally jam these cell phones.
Now, why do you have to vote on it? Because what they're going through, they're basically, a cell phone is essentially a glorified radio, isn't it? Can you just broadcast, or whether it be T-Mobile or, whatever, AT&T, can't they just stop letting these phones work?
We've taken some action over the years to try to allow it, that type of thing, but it's been slightly less effective than we'd like. The reason we have to vote is this reason for jamming. There's a provision of federal law, 47 U.S.C. 333, if people really care about it, that says that you cannot jam authorized stations. And a cell phone is a station for purposes of the law. And so for years, the federal government said you can't jam because of that provision. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to say that contraband cell phones are not authorized devices. And therefore, we're going to remove that longstanding federal prohibition that state and locals felt like prohibited them from jamming.
Now, when you say vote, you're talking about the FCC board, or you're going to have to take that to Congress?
That's right. It's the FCC board. So the FCC is authorized for 5 commissioners. Right now, we're 3 commissioners, myself included. So we're 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat. And we'll vote at our monthly meeting. Every month we have a meeting where, it's kind of like a little mini Congress and we vote on things. So we'll vote on that proposal. Then we've got to seek public comment. But we're going to move pretty quickly then to get that to a final order. And then states are free at that point.
Great. And obviously, every single thing anybody in the Trump administration or the orbit does, they go in and sue. Is this something that they could also seek relief in a court and say, no, you shouldn't be doing this, because they seem to be doing everything to support criminals?
Yeah, it's possible that we could see some of that, but I'm pretty hopeful though that we'll be able to get this done without significant opposition. I mean, look, I know folks on the left are pretty radical and pretty wild about some of the stuff they do, but allowing contraband cell phones to continue seems like even a stretch for that. So I hope we get a bipartisan vote at the agency. I hope it's not appealed, but if it is, I think I'm confident that we'll get this done at the end regardless.
So when is this next meeting? Are we looking at October, or you still have one coming in September?
Yeah, September 30th. So we're going to get this on the September 30th meeting.
And what else do you have coming up on there possibly?
We got some interesting stuff. So one of the things that we're doing here at the FCC is we're pushing this Build America agenda. You may remember, and some of your listeners may remember, during the Biden years, they got this $42 billion program to connect millions of Americans to high-speed internet. And after 1,000 days of having that program running, led by Vice President Harris, not a single American was connected. Not even a single shovel's worth of dirt was turned. It was sort of a microcosm for what went wrong during the Biden administration, where they wrapped that program up in DEI requirements, in climate change obligations, in price controls, and it was just going nowhere. So Trump came in, and he and Commerce Secretary Lutnick have totally revamped that program, and we're getting things going. So we're going to vote this month on permitting reform because, again, there's just too much red tape when you try to build. And so we're going to be voting on a number of items that are designed to accelerate infrastructure builds in this country. One of the great things about this job is I try to spend as little time inside DC as possible, and I meet directly with the tower climbers and the telecom crews that are actually doing the work. And it's helpful for me to hear from them about what's actually slowing them down. And those are the things that we're going to vote on trying to remove.
Oh, awesome. Now, with President Trump announcing Operation Midway Blitz today, and then the Supreme Court coming out and basically saying it is legal to go ahead and do it, is there any way or any sort of strategy to attack the phones of some of these Antifa guys so they can't be coordinating where they're going to strike and how they're going to let people know where ICE is going to go? Is that something you guys can put together?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There was an incident a couple months back where a radio station in California was allegedly, broadcasting the live locations of ICE operations. And I had the FCC team, take a look, and we, sent a formal letter to that broadcaster to make sure that what they're doing isn't inconsistent with their public interest obligations. And more broadly, one of the things that we see with a lot of this is sort of harassing phone calls and things that can be placed. We saw swatting incidents, for instance, and we have tools that we've made available to law enforcement to trace back those types of phone calls in an effort to hold those bad guys accountable.
Great. Now, I want to do something different with you. I know we have a short period of time, but some of the people we have on here, I had Todd Lyons on last week, but most of the people in the audience really don't get a chance to sit down and talk to somebody that's in government the way you are. So I decided, on Friday or so, I was going to put it out there and say, give me your questions for Chairman Carr, and let's have like a rapid fire, type of thing. And they actually put out some good questions. So here's one question, and you may have to explain what Smith-Mundt is, but it says, can Director Carr and President Trump reinstate the Smith-Mundt Act that was repealed by President Obama that allows the media to purposely and intentionally use propaganda against American citizens? So what is the Smith-Mundt Act, and is that even a possibility?
It hasn't come up in the context of the FCC that much. What it did at its core was it prohibited or applied to State Department funding of propaganda, and it regulated those types of things. But the truth is, if you look at the State Department right now and what Secretary Rubio has done in terms of shutting down the different efforts that were engaged there to promote censorship, that's been very, very productive and effective work. And I think that's kind of the most important thing on that front right now.
Okay. Is there something that the FCC can do to tamp down the rhetoric from politicians who seem to advocate for violent responses? Now, some of this stuff might be like touching the rail of censorship, which we don't want to get into, but as elected officials, shouldn't they be held to a higher standard in some of the stuff that they spew?
Yeah, look, I do think there's a concerning phenomenon over the last couple of years where there's been, in my view, sort of an alignment between a lot of these hoaxes that Democrat politicians have been spreading and the ability of those hoaxes to gain traction because of what the legacy broadcast media has done in terms of giving them a sense of legitimacy. And one of the things that, I've been very clear about in this job is we need to hold broadcasters accountable to their public interest obligations. Again, this communication that you and I have right now, that's not regulated by the FCC. Someone stay on the soapbox, not regulated by the FCC. But if you're a broadcast TV station or even a broadcast radio station that has an FCC license, you have a public interest obligation. That's above and beyond what any other speaker has. We're trying to reinvigorate that. And the truth is, so much of the national conversation has been taken over by, ABC and NBC. Effectively, they're, Hollywood and New York C-suites. And what we're trying to do at the FCC is re-empower, local broadcast stations, the folks that are actually connected to their community, and re-empower them. So I think there's a lot that we can do to shift the way legacy media is approaching these issues. In fact, I think the truth is President Trump is winning. President Trump ran directly at the legacy news media. He rejected the idea that we just have to accept that they can dictate what we think and what we can say. And he's getting results, right? So NPR is defunded. PBS is defunded. Colbert is getting into retirement. CBS is making changes, including putting in place an ombudsman. So we're starting to see some real results. And I think that's what we need to keep focusing on.
I think you just might have answered this question because I was listening to what you just said. And you said this conversation we are having right now is not under the auspices of the FCC. So that meaning YouTube videos and X videos and Facebook videos, does that mean they're not covered by licensing or FCC? Because it seems to be, as much as everyone has tried to dial back censorship, there is still the need to speak in code, especially here on YouTube. There are certain words you can't say. They don't like you showing anybody carrying a weapon at all. Are they allowed to do that because of what you just said? They're not under the auspices of the FCC.
That's right. Yeah, if you're a broadcast TV, broadcast radio, you have a license by the FCC. And because we're licensing you, we're keeping others off of that portion of the airway. So you have to have an obligation to represent not just your interest, but the public interest. But when it comes to cable channels or online or YouTube, we don't license or regulate that. But I will say, I do think that we need to, continue to maintain a commitment to America's culture and tradition of free speech. And I mean, look, when you look at what happened, obviously during the, COVID, when you had this massive increase in government control, you necessarily saw an increase in censorship as well, because free speech is the counterweight to government control. But I've been, pleased, although I don't know how long it's going to last, I'm pleased that a lot of these platforms have returned to some semblance of free speech. Obviously, Elon Musk put it all on the line. Buying Twitter has helped restore free speech there. Mark Zuckerberg now is saying that he's for free speech. Again, we'll see how long that holds. But we start to see some good progress, but obviously, a ways to go still on these online platforms.
Like, for instance, the unfortunate incident, I wouldn't call it incident, the murder of the woman on the train in Charlotte, which President Trump mentioned today. It was so horrific, and the national media pretty much ignored it. And if we wanted to say something about it, we could talk about it, but we couldn't show any of the video. Is that something that Section 230 and reforming that would get that out of the way, or does Section 230 not have anything to do really with the FCC?
Yeah, well, Section 230 is an interesting conversation. So this is the law that gives liability protections for technology companies. So you would think with 230 in place, YouTube and others would be more permissive in terms of what they allow you to show. But I think that this national conversation around that just horrific incident in Charlotte is really telling. You look at a lot of the legacy outlets, and they're saying, well, this was a troubled individual. The system failed him. And, when you see other incidents, they take a very different narrative approach. And so I'm glad that, at least on social media, if not on the legacy media, there's been, the adequate airing of this issue.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't talk about it, they won't. And that's it seems like the networks and the Democrats know that if we just ignore stories, the only way people are going to find out about it is through, what happens on YouTube, Facebook, or X.
This is what's so interesting of this sort of moment in the media right now, where you've got the legacy gatekeepers, again, ABC and NBC and others, their power and their sort of authority is declining. And there's a lot of people on the left that are really mad about the fact that there's a lot of conservatives that are popular online. What they don't understand is like, this wasn't easy for people to build this up, but it was a necessity because the legacy outlets were shutting down diversity of viewpoints and diversity of thought. And so it's happened to benefit the conservative movement because, again, as that, legacy media power declines, you got folks like you and others that are already there that have your platform that continue to grow your audiences.
Right. And we definitely need it. We need more, actually. So I hope people get incentivized to get out there, especially for the next couple of years. As the media conglomerates, the big, I don't forget the actual statistic about how few companies own so much of the news out there. Is there anything the FCC can do to keep these big companies from gobbling up local outlets?
Well, it's interesting. When you look at the media landscape, you got to divide it into two buckets. So on the one hand, you've got what we describe in FCC parlance as national programmers. That's, Comcast, NBC, that's Disney, ABC. On the other hand, you've got local TV station ownership groups like Sinclair, for instance. And to some extent, what we're trying to do is empower station group owners like Sinclair because they want to be responsive to their local communities, and to some extent shrink the power of Comcast, NBC, and Disney, ABC. And so I do think there's a point at which, getting some more scale, those local stations, particularly to the extent that that's helping to beat back some of the power of the national programs, is actually a good thing. And so I'm open-minded on that one.
When RFK Jr. was campaigning with President Trump, one of the things he floated out there was pulling ads from television from Big Pharma. And after that hearing last week where they attacked him mercilessly, is that something that you guys down the road, and maybe you can't talk about it right now, are going to be looking? I thought that might be the reaction, but is that so? How could I ask that without giving up any operational security? Is that possible?
Yeah. Well, one, stay tuned. Point one is stay tuned. Point two is there is some precedent for that. So, for instance, Congress passed a law that banned cigarette advertising, and the FCC helps enforce that. So, if there was some federal law or federal regulation passed that prohibited certain types of advertisements, whether they're on billboards or on TV, the FCC could have a role in helping to enforce that with respect to TV, just like we do with cigarette advertising today.
How did it happen with cigarettes? Was it just an uproar? Did it start with the FCC, or did it start in Congress where somebody said we need to pull this stuff off the air?
Yeah, this started decades ago through legislative work in Congress, and then it was then the FCC that stepped in to help enforce it at the end of the day. But it was momentum built in Congress. This was I don't know, probably 30 years ago when there was significant interest and attention in nicotine and in cigarettes.
Okay. Now I got an interesting question that I don't know anything about, so I'm going to give it to you. Hopefully you understand what this person was talking. They said, "Will the FCC push for the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act, which forces HOAs to allow ham radio antennas for emergency communications?"
Well, it's a very specific question there, but yes. So amateur radio operators, play an integral role in our communication networks, particularly during natural disasters when a lot of traditional networks go down. They can continue to communicate and pass along significant information. But we do see challenges, not just with amateur radio, but with all sorts of communications where HOAs put regulations in place that stop people from putting their antennas up. We've done some work over the years, including on something, believe it or not, that are called OTARD regulations, over-the-air reception devices. And as a general matter, we are working to make it easier for people to have their own antennas and systems up.
Did you notice? Thank you. Did you notice what President Trump posted today about the link between, and I have to use this word, jabs and autism? And when I saw that, I was like, oh, here comes another one of his comms. He's letting people know that it's being looked at, and I'm just wondering, how could something like that have gone on for so long, and it took somebody like RFK Jr. to begin looking at the causes of autism, and if there is to be found some, I don't know, tie-in to being jabbed, is that something else that would further stimulate reining in big pharma?
Well, I haven't seen that particular thing, but I will say I did watch Secretary Kennedy's testimony in Congress last week, and I thought it was really interesting because I think the baseline point that he was making was exactly right, which is we're a very sick country, right? Things are not where they need to be as a matter of health. And so he is trying to change things and shake things up. And for people to be saying, you can't change anything, I mean, the status quo is unacceptable. Let's try something different. Let's try to do something that's going to help make this country a little bit healthier. And so I support changes that are taking place.
Okay. So question about TikTok, which I think you've already answered because it's a social platform. It's not licensed, but I'm wondering because it's not American, is there something that the FCC can be involved in and reining in the craziness that's happening on TikTok?
Well, it's not an FCC issue, as you noted, but Congress did pass a law that puts in place some protections to try to safeguard against any national security threats. And that's now being sort of worked on in the administration, that they'll land that in a way that protects America's national security interests. But what's interesting, this ties back to our first conversation, is you've got now all these contraband cell phones in prison. And apparently, and I hadn't known this before, but I'm not on TikTok, but prisoners are using them to open up TikTok accounts. And you've got like parents of people who were murdered by inmates. And now those inmates are sitting there making TikTok videos inside prison. So it's another sort of reinforcement that we got to do something to shut this down with these contraband cell phones.
Oh, man. I've never heard of something like that before. And it was funny. I was driving over and Ashley said, talked about contraband cell phones. I'm like, what the hell is a contraband? Yeah. I was thinking, is it made of like pot or something? Because I think contraband, I'm thinking that, it's, I would never have, I couldn't even fathom that they're getting cell phones actually in prison. How much of that is like, well, I don't know, you're not in law enforcement per se, but you mentioned a lot of different ways that these phones get into prison. Is that something you can coordinate with Pam Bondi or Kash Patel and say, working on that end as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, we were standing with the National Sheriff's Association for this event. I was with Senator Cotton, Governor Huckabee. So yeah, we're bringing all components, federal and state law enforcement to bear to try to address this problem.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Anything else that you're seeing? You've got this meeting coming up on September 30th. Any other agendas that the people should be aware of that are going to be happening?
No, it's all good. It's been so great to engage with you and really enjoyed the thoughtful conversation and great to be on with you.
And what's funny is because you have such a vital role in government, and it seems like not enough people understand what the FCC does. So in closing, can you give me like a quick synopsis on all the different aspects of communication that you guys control?
Yeah, but basically, all forms of, mass communication, the FCC potentially touches on. So we help support, rural internet builds. We obviously regulate, the cell phone providers. We help boost the space economy. We sort of regulate and authorize the communications component of launches. We have a big national security role as well in terms of dealing with threats posed by communist China. So it's a really interesting job, a lot of different features to it.
So I always do this. People know it. I was like, oh, last question. But wait a second. You just said something. Two things you just said. One, I had no idea that you guys were tied into the launches, especially being down here in South Florida. So how do you keep the communications secret when these launches are going up? Is there like some sort of signal jammer that's around, the launch pad?
Yeah, well, not a jammer because of Section 333, but in general, yes, we sort of there's no communications you're allowed to do unless authorized by the FCC, and so we do everything from command and control in terms of authorizing that, and we also deal with with this new generation of low Earth orbit satellites that SpaceX and Starlink are putting up there, and we regulate and promote the deployment of that technology.
Wow. I would never even thought about that until you mentioned working with NASA and space and because a lot of them are private companies as well, not just the government. With Elon and I guess Bezos is putting stuff up there as well. So that's a huge communication thing. And then you said defense or war, as it's now called. when something is happening in another country, I understand, and if this is national security, don't touch it, but I understand NSA can listen in, and I understand we have intelligence. How much of that bleeds into the FCC, or you guys just handle, quote, federal communications?
Yeah, we're just domestic here. Any communications outside, the boundaries of the U.S. Would, as a general matter, be unregulated by the FCC.
Wow. Very, very. Let me just check. Well, thank you very much, because that was very eye-opening for myself as well. And I'd love to see what happens on September 30th, and Ashley can get you back and come back on, because I'm just looking in here and everyone's talking about it. And there were just a ton of questions that I couldn't get to because I wanted to keep you within the time frame and not.
Yeah, we'll do it again. Yeah, we'll do it again. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you
All
can
right, thanks,
see
buddy.
there's Director Brendan Carr's X handle, so you can get a hold of him there. Thank you very much, sir.